Japan's earthquake intensity scale ends at level 7. There is no level 8. The scale physically cannot report anything worse. On the afternoon of July the 28th, 2026, two communities south of Kumamoto City, Uki City, and the town of Hikawa, recorded exactly that, a maximum Shindo intensity of 7, the ceiling of what Japanese instruments are built to measure. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake tore through Kumamoto Prefecture on the island of Kyushu at 4:27 in the afternoon local time. As of the most recent reporting, at least 18 people have been confirmed dead, dozens more injured, and more than 150,000 people have evacuated their homes. Those numbers are almost certainly not final, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. What we can tell you with confidence is what actually happened, what the historical record from this exact fault system says about what typically comes next, and why Japanese officials are treating the coming week as seriously as they are. The Shindo scale deserves a quick explanation because the rest of this story depends on understanding it. It runs from 0 through 7 across 10 steps, with levels 5 and 6 each split into upper and lower tiers, and it's measured directly by instruments at hundreds of stations across the country, not estimated from the earthquake's overall size. Japan built its warning systems, building codes and public alerts around this intensity measurement rather than magnitude alone, for a simple reason. Intensity is what actually hits you at your specific location. Japan has recorded a Shindo 7 only 7 times before in the entire instrumented era. Kobe in 1995, Niigata in 2004, the Tohoku megaquake in 2011, Kumamoto twice in 2016, Hokkaido in 2018, and the Noto Peninsula in 2024. Today makes 8, and 3 of those 8 readings have now come from the same prefecture. The rupture occurred at a depth of roughly 10 kilometers, about 6 miles, shallower than a cruising airliner flies. That shallow depth meant the earthquake's energy had almost no distance to weaken before reaching homes, schools, roads, and rail lines, striking inland directly beneath a densely populated corridor of Kyushu rather than offshore. The USGS initially placed the magnitude at 6.8, while the Japan Meteorological Agency, operating the densest seismic network on the planet, sitting directly on top of the rupture, measured it at 7.1. That gap between agencies is a normal early spread that narrows as more data gets processed in the following days, and it matters less than it might seem, since the intensity reading itself isn't an estimate that gets revised. Those instruments in Uki and Hikawa recorded exactly what they recorded. The most serious single incident is unfolding at a shopping mall in the region, where an explosion following the earthquake caused a partial collapse of the second floor, trapping a significant number of people inside. Police have indicated they expect a difficult outcome from that specific site, though no confirmed death toll from the mall alone has been released. The timing matters here. 4:27 on a Tuesday afternoon sits close to peak traffic for a Japanese shopping mall, with school out and food courts busy. Officials have not confirmed the exact cause of the explosion, though a gas-related cause following structural damage from the earthquake itself is a common pattern in events like this. Rescue crews have been working that site continuously, with every aftershock forcing temporary withdrawals before crews can safely re-enter. The wider damage picture continues filling in. Japan's National Police Agency has reported at least 12 collapsed buildings, including cases where people remain trapped inside homes, concentrated heavily in the city of Yatsushiro. A large bridge in the region has come down. Multiple fires have been reported burning across Kumamoto City and surrounding areas, with people trapped in more than one location. In Ikawa, the same town that recorded the maximum intensity reading, dozens of people have been injured and transported to hospitals, including patients at a care facility. Roughly 50,000 households in Kumamoto lost electricity, and the regional power utility has warned residents against touching downed power lines. The scale of Japan's emergency response reflects how seriously officials are treating the days ahead. More than 150,000 people have evacuated, with evacuation instructions reportedly covering as many as 300,000 residents across the region. Every rail line operated by JR Kyushu, including the Kyushu Shinkansen bullet train, has been suspended, and Kumamoto Airport closed its runway. These shutdowns aren't overcaution, they follow strict procedural necessity. High-speed rail cannot resume until every kilometer of track, every viaduct, and every tunnel has been physically inspected, since a bullet train meeting a displaced rail joint at nearly 300 kilometers per hour would be its own mass casualty event. Japan's Prime Minister stood up a government task force within the hour of the earthquake, and the National Police Agency opened a dedicated disaster response headquarters in Tokyo. This level of mobilization exists because Japan's institutional memory holds a very specific, very relevant precedent from this exact location. 10 years ago, in April of 2016, Kumamoto was hit by a magnitude 6.5 earthquake that also registered a maximum intensity of 7. Seismologists at the time treated it as the main shock, and residents began returning to their damaged homes believing the worst had passed. 28 hours later, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake ruptured the connected Futagawa Fault, larger than the first event, also registering intensity 7. The earthquake everyone had assumed was the main event was reclassified afterward as a foreshock. Roughly 276 people died across that 2016 sequence, many in buildings that had been weakened but left standing by the first shock, only to collapse when the second, larger earthquake arrived before anyone could reinforce them. That specific mechanism, structural damage from an initial quake compounding into collapse during a second, stronger event, is exactly why Japan's current guidance, developed directly from this prefecture's own history, tells residents that a quake of comparable size can follow for roughly a week after a large inland earthquake. When Japan's prime minister publicly urged the country to take precautions because earthquakes of similar scale remain possible over the coming week. That wasn't generic caution. It was this exact fault system's own documented track record, now written into official national policy. The tsunami threat from today's earthquake resolved relatively quickly. Within roughly 2 minutes of the rupture, the Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory for the Ariake and Yatsushiro seas, with waves up to 1 meter considered possible. That 2-minute response time reflects decades of preparation. The agency maintains a database of pre-calculated tsunami scenarios for fault systems across the country, and the moment an event is located and sized, the closest matching scenario triggers an alert automatically. No significant tsunami waves were ultimately recorded, and the advisory has since been lifted. That outcome is consistent with the nature of the rupture itself. This was a strike-slip earthquake within the crust under land, rather than the kind of offshore seafloor displacement that typically generates large tsunamis. On the question of nuclear safety, which understandably arises immediately whenever a major earthquake strikes Japan, 2 power plants sit in the wider region. The operating utility completed initial safety checks at both facilities and reported no abnormalities, a status that will continue being reassessed after every significant aftershock. Kumamoto also sits at the center of Japan's semiconductor manufacturing industry, giving this earthquake economic reach well beyond the immediate region. The world's largest chipmaker operates a major fabrication facility in this prefecture and evacuated workers as a precaution, and other electronics manufacturers operate production facilities in the same corridor. During the 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes, similar facility damage disrupted global camera sensor supply chains for months afterward. No damage to current operations has been reported at this time, though assessments are ongoing and chip fabrication facilities are extraordinarily vibration sensitive, meaning even a clean shutdown and restart carries real production costs. The aftershock sequence began almost immediately, with a magnitude 4.5 event recorded roughly 2 minutes after the main shock, followed by additional aftershocks in the same hour, including a separate intensity 5 event in a neighboring area. Seismologists apply a statistical principle called Bath's Law here, which holds that across thousands of historical earthquake sequences, the largest aftershock typically lands about 1.1 to 1.2 magnitude units below the main shock. Applied to today's magnitude 7.1 event, that puts the statistical expectation for the largest aftershock somewhere around magnitude 5.9 to 6.0. This is not a forecast, and after the 2016 precedent, nobody in Japan treats it as a firm ceiling either. It's simply the most probable outcome drawn from a historical pattern that has occasionally produced something larger. A separate principle, Omori's law, describes how aftershock frequency generally decays over time, rapid immediately after the main event, then gradually thinning out over the following days and weeks. A sequence that follows this expected decay pattern is behaving normally. A sequence that stalls, surges, or produces events that stop getting smaller is the pattern that earns closer scientific attention. Precisely because 2016 demonstrated that the distinction between an aftershock and a foreshock only becomes clear in hindsight. The specific diagnostic worth watching over the coming days is the aftershock map itself. If epicenters stay tightly clustered around the initial rupture zone, that's consistent with a normal sequence gradually winding down, and each passing day without escalation makes a repeat of the 2016 pattern statistically less likely. If instead the epicenters begin stretching into a line running along the broader fault zone, that would raise a more serious question about whether stress is being transferred into an adjacent fault segment, which is part of the pattern that preceded the escalation in 2016. Several inaccurate claims began circulating within hours of the earthquake, and addressing them directly helps clarify what's actually happening. The most significant false claim suggests this earthquake occurred on, or triggered, the Nankai Trough, the offshore subduction zone east of this region considered the source for Japan's largest potential magnitude 8 and 9 earthquake scenarios. It did not. Today's rupture occurred within the shallow crust of central Kyushu, on the same general fault system that broke in 2016, structurally separate from the offshore subduction interface. In August, of 2024 when a magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck offshore near the actual edge of the Nankai system. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued its first ever formal Nankai Trough Advisory. No such advisory has been issued in connection with today's earthquake, which is itself the clearest available signal of what this event is and isn't. A second circulating claim involves older video footage from the 2016 Kumamoto castle damage being presented as new footage from today, a mix-up made easier by the fact that the castle's restoration from 2016 is still ongoing a decade later. A third claim suggests nearby volcanic systems, including Mount Aso, may be responding to the earthquake. A tectonic earthquake occurring nearby does not, on its own, indicate rising magma, and the specific signals that would actually indicate volcanic unrest, sustained volcanic tremor, rapid ground deformation, or an official alert level change have not been reported in connection with today's event. It's worth clarifying one distinction that tends to cause confusion anytime an earthquake like this happens, because two different numbers are being used somewhat interchangeably in a lot of the coverage. Magnitude, it measures the total energy released by the earthquake itself, a single number describing the entire event regardless of location. Intensity measures how violently the ground actually moved at a specific location, which varies depending on distance from the rupture, depth, and local geology. A magnitude 7.1 is nowhere near the largest earthquake Japan has ever recorded. The Tohoku earthquake in 2011 measured magnitude 9.0, releasing dramatically more total energy. But a shallow rupture occurring directly beneath a populated area delivers its energy at close range, which is precisely how today's magnitude 7.1 produced the maximum possible reading on the intensity scale, while some larger earthquakes occurring farther offshore have produced lower peak intensity readings at the surface. The geometry of today's event, shallow depth combined with a location directly beneath populated communities, represents close to the most severe outcome available for this particular fault system. Japan's approach to this disaster reflects a country that has been here before, in the same prefecture, with the same underlying lesson. The 2016 sequence forced the Japan Meteorological Agency to formally revise its public guidance, moving away from any implication that aftershocks would only continue getting smaller after an initial large earthquake, because Kumamoto's own history had already proven that assumption could cost lives. Every emergency decision being made in the region right now, the transport shutdowns, the evacuation orders, the repeated nuclear safety checks, the explicit week-long precaution window, is built on refusing to repeat that same assumption a second time. The instruments monitoring this sequence are running continuously, and the picture will continue filling in over the coming days as rescue operations proceed and additional data comes in. What's known right now is the confirmed damage, the historical pattern. This exact fault system has already demonstrated once before, and the specific signals officials and seismologists will be watching closely to determine which version of this story is actually unfolding. Our thoughts are with everyone affected in Kumamoto right now. The aftershock map will show whether this sequence is clustering normally or migrating along the fault. The magnitude of subsequent aftershocks will show whether the sequence is following its statistically expected decay pattern. Casualty figures from the mall collapse specifically will likely become clearer through the coming hours as rescue operations continue. And nuclear plant safety checks will continue after every significant aftershock, with each clean report providing real, meaningful reassurance rather than a formality. Japan's official guidance remains direct. People in the hardest hit areas are being told to stay out of damaged buildings, avoid slopes and retaining walls, and remain prepared for shaking of similar scale for approximately 1 week, based directly on the same fault system's own documented history. We'll continue following this story closely as verified information comes in over the coming days. Thank you for watching.